After a historic day with 8 playoff games, the most in a day in MLB history, the Rays, Yankees, and Astros are heading to the ALDS. The White Sox and A's are set to play a decisive Game 3 today, and 4 NL teams are now just one loss away from elimination. Hello, everyone, and welcome into this Thursday, October 1st edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports, live streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live and twitch.tv/110sports. Also available on demand on the website, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just search for 110 Sports. Yesterday truly was a baseball day unlike any other. There was a real March Madness feel with it 1.5 postseason games, more than have ever taken place on the same day, in progress at the same time. So it wasn't even just that we had 8 postseason games yesterday, it was that we had at one point 5 of them happening simultaneously. We had the first postseason game ever to be scoreless through 11 innings, one that featured 19 combined runs, and just about everything in between. And that 19 total runs game, by the way, the longest 9-inning game in MLB history. Not postseason history, MLB history. Regular season, playoffs, whatever it might be. So, wow, what a day it was in baseball yesterday. We had 4 games on Tuesday as well, and we have 4 games being played today as well. The AL Central's top 2 teams this season in the standings both eliminated without winning a single playoff contest. We've got 1 AL Wildcard Game 3 today, as well as 3 NL Wildcard Game 2s, including one in progress right now. We have Cincinnati and Atlanta playing. That game got underway just about an hour ago, and the update as of right now, they are in the middle of the third, and there's no score in Atlanta. The Braves hold a 1-0 lead in that series. And the reason I said 3 NL wildcard game 2s instead of 4, which is what was on the schedule, because just in the last couple of minutes now, literally just a few seconds before the beginning of this broadcast, we learned that the Cubs-Marlins game scheduled for today in Chicago has been postponed due to the forecast calling for rain today. So Game 2 of that series will now take place, according to ESPN's Jesse Rogers, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, Game 2 for Cubs-Marlins. And that means that the wildcard series could extend. We could have wildcard series games extending into Saturday, as Game 3 of that series, should the Cubs win Game 2, would be played on Saturday at a time to be announced. So a lot going on right now. That news just coming in. But let's jump right into the show today, because we have a lot to talk about. And here's how we're going to break it down for you, because like I said, we've had a total of 12 games. 12 wildcard series games played over the last 2 days. We've got another one in action right now. So it's been a lot to keep up with for anyone who's been paying close attention, let alone someone who hasn't been able to pay really close attention to what's been going on over the last couple days. So I'm going to try to get you caught up on what we've seen the last couple of days, where things stand, and what it all means. That's the basic approach for today. And the way we're going to break it down is pretty simple, and I think this is just the best way to go about it, given the sheer quantity of games and just structurally, organizationally, to keep things straight. We're just going to go through the AL side. We're going to go through the wild card series. We're going to tell you about the 3 that have already ended, with the Rays, Yankees, and Astros heading to the ALDS, and the one that's still going on for a Game 3 today. We're going to go through some news and notes, and then we're going to go through the NL side, where we've had just 1 game in all of the series, and now 3 Game 2s on tap for today. So we'll talk about the Game 1s there. And of course, in best of 3 series here, a Game 1 win is significant. So normally, just talking about Game 1 of a series, maybe it's not that consequential, but we're in a situation where, like I said, 4 NL teams, including some favorites, some heavy favorites in those series, are in a situation where they're a loss away from heading home. And then we'll wrap up the show with what's on deck, an update on the scoreboard for you, and what you can expect, what's on tap for the rest of today, tomorrow, and now apparently potentially Saturday as well. So let's jump right into the show here. Let's jump right into the AL Wildcard Series update. We're going to go through each of the series, and this is basically how it's going to work. I'm going to give you the info about the basics of what happened in these series or what's happening in these series, and then just my take about what it means about the team that lost, or if there's a team that's already heading home, or if the team that's advancing, what did we learn about that team? So I'll just kind of give you some off the top of my head, or not off the top of my head, but some thoughts, some brief thoughts about what we've learned about these teams and what we've learned from these matchups. So we're going to start with the Rays-Blue Jays series. And the Rays, as you can see here on the graphic, they swept the Blue Jays to advance to the ALDS. A very deep and dangerous Rays team advancing to the ALDS, winning Game 1 by a score of 3-1 and Game 2 by a score of 8-2. And the big key for Tampa Bay, as you would expect in this series, was pitching. Game 1, it was Blake Snell, who took a no-hitter into the 6th inning, becoming the first left-handed pitcher in MLB postseason history with 9+ strikeouts and 1 or 0 hits allowed in a game, which is quite remarkable. And then Pete Fairbanks became the 13th pitcher for the club to record a save this year. In Game 2, the Rays' great pitching performance was from Tyler Glasnow, the club's best pitcher this season, who threw 6 innings of 2-run ball with a 1 walk and 8 strikeouts, and then 3 Tampa Bay relievers combined to allow just 1 hit, 0 runs the rest of the way. In all, Tampa Bay's pitchers held Toronto's young but certainly talented and above average offense to just 3 total runs in the 2-game series. As far as the flip side, the Rays offense / the Blue Jays pitching, in Game 1, it wasn't an overpowering effort from the Rays. They just got a timely 2-run home run from outfielder Manuel Margot. That proved to be the game winner. In Game 2, Tampa Bay's bats really came alive. They knocked out Blue Jays ace Hyunjin Ryu from the game in the 2nd inning. The Rays scored 1 run in the 1st inning and then 6 in the 2nd, capped off by a grand slam from Hunter Renfroe, which was the first grand slam in Tampa Bay Rays postseason history. But due to an error by Bo Bichette, the Blue Jays shortstop, which then the grand slam later followed, only 3 of the 7 runs were actually charged as earned runs to Ryu. But it doesn't really matter so much as far as the end results. He still was knocked out of the game, and the Blue Jays were unable to do much damage at the plate, as mentioned, against Glasnow and the Rays bullpen, outside of 2 solo home runs from catcher Danny Jansen. And that was it. The Rays sweeping the Blue Jays, advancing to the ALDS. It was pretty convincing win for the Rays. As far as the Blue Jays, this is a young and exciting team that clearly just has some flaws. And look, I guess I should preface any of these, when we talk about the losing teams in these series, as, look, the Blue Jays lost 2 games in a row. I think the Rays are clearly the superior team. But this isn't to say just because the Blue Jays lost this series and they didn't win a game means it was just disastrous and the end of the world and there's any reason to panic. I mean, look, the nature of this season means that, a very good, good teams are in a situation where you lose 2 in a row and it's over, or 2 of 3 and it's over. And that just happens sometimes. You get bad outings, you get bad performances. Now, I'm not saying that to mean that I think the Blue Jays should have won this series or anything like that. The Rays, clearly one of the best teams in the majors, clearly superior to the Blue Jays. But, look, this is a Toronto team that's young. It's got a lot of up-and-coming hitters. It has flaws, too. It has inexperience in amongst the hitters, young hitters, and it has rotation concerns, which we saw play out. I certainly didn't expect Hyunjin Ryu to struggle as he did in Game 2. But the Blue Jays were in a situation where they just didn't have a lot of other great arms to throw out there aside from Ryu, and offense couldn't get going against Tampa Bay's pitching. And that's that. Rays will head to the ALDS to face the New York Yankees, who outlasted the Indians in a Game 2 thriller to sweep that series. And this was quite a series. Both of these games were just remarkable games. And I can tell you I watched pretty much all of both of them. I think probably all of both of them. And the first thing to note here, of course, is just how absurd last night's game was. But before we get to that, I do want to start go in order here. Let's go with game one. And heading into game one, which was Tuesday night, it was the last game of the AL wildcard slate on Tuesday. Each of the other three AL wildcard matchups that day had been very low scoring affairs. And then you'd go into that game, and it was Shane Bieber, AL Cy Young winner to be, against Garrett Cole, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And it seemed like we'd have a pitcher's duel on tap, something similar to what we'd seen. Instead, Bieber surrendered 7 earned runs in 4 2/3 innings to the Yankees offense, walking 2, striking out 7. And it was all over at that point. But then the Cleveland bullpen surrendered another 5 earned runs as well. Aaron Judge, Gleyber Torres, Brett Gardner, Giancarlo Stanton, they all homered in the game. Torres becoming the first Yankees shortstop with at least 4 hits and 3 RBI in a postseason game ever. The Yankees won that one 12-3 in really in blowout fashion that nobody expected. The Yankees 12 runs, tying the most ever by a road team in a playoff series opener. And like I said, the Yankees offense is incredible, but it was certainly their outburst of surprise coming against the best pitcher in baseball this year, who allowed 7 earned runs in the start, which is as many as he allowed in his first 7 starts this season. And he allowed 14 for the entire regular season. So he allowed half his regular season total in this one game. Cole, meanwhile, Garrett Cole, for the Yankees, was lights out. 7 innings, 2 earned runs, no walks, 13 strikeouts. He became the first AL pitcher with 13 strikeouts and no walks in a postseason start ever, and also the first pitcher in MLB history to reach 3 postseason starts of 12-plus strikeouts. So Garrett Cole finding great success. This is what they got him for. The Yankees to pitch in games just like that one. And the Yankees took game 1 convincingly 12-3. And then we get to game 2 last night, which was, I believe, the second, I guess it finished the second to last game. I don't know if it started second to last, but it finished pretty darn late because here's the rundown for it. In a game that started in August, it ended in September. It was 4 hours and 50 minutes long, the longest 9-inning game in MLB history. Regular season, postseason, ever. The longest 9-inning game in MLB history. The Yankees topping the Indians 10-9, thanks to a tie-breaking 9th inning RBI single from batting champ DJ LeMahieu off of Indians closer Brad Hand for Hand's first blown save of the season. And it would take too long to tell you about all the scoring, so I'll just say it was a crazy back-and-forth affair from start to finish. Neither starter fared well. Carlos Carrasco, 3 innings, 4 earned runs. Masahiro Tanaka, 6 earned runs in 4 frames. In the end, though, Cleveland's bullpen just couldn't get the job done against the Yankees, with 4 of their 6 relievers that were brought in giving up runs. And with a grand slam and an outstanding defensive play to save runs by starting a double play, Yankees third baseman Gio Urshela, the former Cleveland Indian, I might add, was the Yankees star throughout the night. He became the first Yankees third baseman ever to hit a postseason grand slam. And the Yankees outlasting Cleveland, taking game 2. And they'll advance to face the Rays in the ALDS. And, in watching this game, there were several times I kind of just thought, the Indians, they'll find a way to force a game 3. I probably figured the Yankees would probably win game 3. I wasn't thinking the Indians were going to win the series, but I just kept thinking every time the Indians tied it up, pulled ahead, that, okay, they would be able to figure this out. And the Yankees' bats just kept going against Cleveland's bullpen. Overall, the Yankees scored 22 runs against Cleveland in the 2-game sweep. They became the second team in MLB history to score 2 runs in each of their first 2 postseason games. As far as Cleveland, with them now eliminated, it's the first time that a team with the best ERA in the AL in the regular season, went winless in the playoffs since 1954. Their pitching just let them down. Cleveland hasn't won a World Series since 1948. Now that drought will continue. They've now lost 8 straight postseason games and dropped a record 10 consecutive elimination contests. As I said, the Yankees will now face the Rays in the ALDS. As far as what we learned from this series, the Yankees' bats, they're going at full strength. They may not be able to be stopped. And in a battle of bats versus arms, the bats won out in this case. As the Indians pitchers, like I said, they've been, like we've talked about, they've been the best rotation, one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. Carlos Carrasco didn't do well, and Shane Bieber had his worst start of the year in Game 1, and that's it. I don't have a real rhyme or reason for Bieber's struggles or Carrasco's struggles or the Cleveland bullpen struggles last night. Other than that, it sometimes happens, and they were facing a great team, but now they're done. And that was your second AL Wildcard Series matchup. Yankees-Rays. It's going to be a fun one in the ALDS. We'll talk about that coming up later in the show. On the other side of the AL bracket, we have the Twins and the Astros. And I had picked the Twins in the preseason to win the AL Championship. I had picked the Twins to win this series. I held by that prediction when we talked about it. I gave my predictions on Tuesday and on the Bonfire podcast. And it just didn't happen. The Astros sweeping the Twins. Minnesota, an 18th straight playoff loss. And the Twins' offense coming into the series seemed to be clicking at the right time down the stretch. And there were pitching concerns for the Astros we talked about them. But the Houston pitchers held the Twins' offense to just 2 runs in the 2 games. Twins hit just 119 in the series. They swept the wild card series. Minnesota's postseason losing streak is 18 games now. That is the longest postseason losing streak in North American major sports history. MLB, NFL, NHL, and what did I say? NBA, NHL, NFL, and MLB. It's the longest postseason losing streak ever. The Astros win in Game 1 4-1 and Game 2 3-1. And the Astros, as far as the Astros, they essentially won their series by using tandem starters. In Game 1, Zach Greinke, 4 innings, 1 earned run, and then Framber Valdez was lights out. He became the first pitcher throwing as a reliever, coming on in relief with 5 shutout innings in a playoff game since Madison Bumgarner, Game 7 of the 2014 World Series. In Game 2, it was Jose Urquidy on the mound to start for the Astros, 1 earned run in 4 1/3 innings. And then after reliever recorded a couple outs, Christian Javier, who'd been a starter for the team most of the season, came on to throw 3 scoreless frames before turning it over to closer Ryan Presley, who picked up the save. On the Twins side, the pitching wasn't bad. Kenta Maeda 5 scoreless in Game 1. Jose Barrios 5 innings, 1 earned run in Game 2. And the Astros offense, they didn't really dominate in this series. I wouldn't say that by any means. But they capitalized on Twins' mistakes. In Game 1, a throwing error by Twins shortstop Jorge Polanco opened up the door for the Astros to score 3 runs in the ninth to break a tie and win 4-1. In Game 2, the Twins had Byron Buxton, who was not starting due to an injury, pinch running as the tying run at first base in a 1-run game in the 8th inning, and he got picked off. The Twins were also playing without third baseman Josh Donaldson, who was left off the playoff roster as he battled an injury. In Game 2, Carlos Correa of the Astros, his 7th inning home run proved to be the difference, and Kyle Tucker tacked on a 9th inning RBI single for the 3-1 win there. Dusty Baker's team had lost 10 straight games with a chance to clinch a postseason series before yesterday's win. So you got to believe he's feeling good about that. And as far as my thoughts on this, Obviously, this is not at all what I expected considering my pick of the Twins to win the AL championship. As far as what went wrong, pitching was good. And that's a lot of the reason I was optimistic about this team. What let them down was the offense. And I don't have a great rhyme or reason for it. Buxton being out game two hurt. Donaldson being out for the series hurt. But, uh, I just thought there was enough depth of quality hitters in that lineup that they'd be able to get enough going. So credit to the Astros pitchers. I mean, they didn't. And then the Twins just made foolish mistakes. A pickoff, an error. I mean, I don't want to say that was an error was foolish. I mean, it was an error. It looked a little bit of a lackadaisical situation. But look, they just made mistakes. They couldn't get it done. Credit to the Astros for this. I still have some questions about this team, especially like I said, they used starters in tandem. Essentially, used four starters in the two games. They're not going to be able to do that in longer postseason series. So eventually, their bullpen's going to have to be used more, and it's a bullpen with a lot of inexperienced arms. So that's something I've got my eye on going forward. But Astros sweep the Twins. Minnesota heading home. Certainly a disappointing a situation from their perspective, and I was very wrong about that pick, but that happens. Final AL series I want to talk about. Not that I want to talk about. Final AL wildcard series to talk about is White Sox and A's. This is the only AL wildcard series that did not end in a sweep, did not end yesterday in two games. In a matchup of two teams that I would actually like both of them to advance, I would be happy to see both of them advance, but of course it's not possible. The White Sox and the A's will face off in a winner-takes-all Game 3 today after splitting the first two games. In Game 1, White Sox ace Lucas Giolito took a no-hitter into the seventh inning, finishing with 7 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 earned run, 8 strikeouts. He became just the 5th pitcher in MLB history to have a no-hitter, to take a no-hitter into the 7th inning. And the White Sox won that one 4-1. Giolito also became the first AL pitcher with 7+ innings, 1 walk or fewer, 1 hit or fewer in a postseason game since 1967. On the offensive end, the White Sox hit 3 home runs, 2 of them coming off of young Oakland starter Jesus Luzardo, to improve their record to a remarkable 15-0 this season when facing a lefty starter. Adam Engel, Jose Abreu, the likely AL MVP winner, and catcher Yasmani Grandal homered for the White Sox in that game. In Game 2, it was Oakland starter Chris Bassett with the great outing. He's been the A's best pitcher this season, and he stepped up with 7 innings, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. The A's winning 5-3 yesterday. Meanwhile, on the other side of that matchup, the A's teed off of Dallas Keuchel for 5 runs, 3 earned in 3 1/3 innings. A fielding error in the first for the White Sox, and then a Marcus Semien 2-run home run in the second. A Chris Davis solo homer in the fourth, and Dallas Keuchel, who's been outstanding this season for the White Sox, was knocked out. Oakland led this game 5-0 entering the 8th inning, and it looked like it was pretty much done, but the White Sox did make things interesting with a Yasmani Grandal 2-run home run and a bases-loaded walk in the ninth, but Jake Diekman got out of the mess inherited from closer Liam Hendricks to secure the win last night. A's and White Sox knotted up at 1 in that series. Game 3 is today, and the White Sox will turn to Dane Dunning, the 25-year-old who's impressed this season but is coming off a really rocky end to the regular season. He'll be going up against Oakland's Mike Fiers, who's had a pretty poor season overall, but he's 4-0 with a 1.56 ERA lifetime against the White Sox. And maybe the biggest key here, he's not left-handed. The Athletics could have turned to a lefty starter again, but they're going with Fiers, and you have to think the White Sox success against lefties played a role in that. So we've got Game 3 in that series today, and that matchup is coming up at 2:10 Central, 3:10 Eastern. So it's going to be an exciting one. That is the only of the wild card series games today where we know that series the game will mark the end of the series. On the NL side, we could have teams tying it up, but no matter what, this is it. White Sox A's winner takes all today, coming up at 3:10 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break of the show here after talking about the AL side. And again, a final note there. So the winner of White Sox-A's will advance to take on the Astros in the ALDS. All right, so now first break for you here today on the show. When we come back, a couple of news and note items for you, and then we'll dive into the NL side. 4 games yesterday, the first 4 games of the NL side of the bracket. 3 games on tap for today, as I mentioned, with the rain out of Cubs Marlins. We'll talk about the NL Game 1s of the Wild Card Series coming up next here on Around the Bases from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to Around the Bases from 110 Sports, live streaming here on the 110 Sports Network, 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110 Sports. I'm Chris Brown. Gonna dive right back in. Before we dive, I should say, right back into the Wild Card Series matchups, gonna go through a couple of news and notes for you here today on this October 1st. First off, a confirmation of what we talked about off the top of the show, that breaking news, if you will, that news just in. Game 2 of the Marlins-Cubs series, in which the Marlins, as we'll talk about here in a minute, hold a 1-0 series lead, has been postponed. It was on tap for today. It has been rescheduled for tomorrow at 2:08 p.m. Eastern at Wrigley Field. The game postponed today due to the forecast calling for rain in the area, so that game has been pushed to tomorrow. As a result, a potential game 3 between the Cubs and the Marlins in that series would take place on Saturday. And some other news and note items for you here today. This one just in: Toronto Blue Jays closer Ken Giles underwent successful Tommy John surgery yesterday, according to MLB Network's John Heyman, who tweets that he's expected to have a 100% recovery. So that's the situation for Ken Giles. Major League Baseball announced yesterday that roughly 11,500 tickets will be made available for each game of the NL Championship Series and World Series at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. This is something we talked about. It has been reported as a possibility last week, and that number would put the park at slightly below 30% capacity. The World Series, of course, is being played at one stadium, the Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, one stadium for the first time since 1944. And as for the fans in attendance, there will be pods of 4 seats together, with those pods distanced from each other and away from the field of play, and masks will be mandatory when not eating. The Associated Press, in their story, noting that the Texas Department of Health State Services reported 5,335 new coronavirus cases in the state yesterday, its highest total since August 25th. Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred said recently on the Big Time Baseball podcast that of the new rules implemented this season, the extra inning runner on second base rule probably has, quote, the best chance of surviving into 2021. Manfred saying, quote, I think that most people came to realize that the rule adds a layer of strategy and sort of a focus at the end of the game that could be helpful to us over the long haul, so I give that one the best chance. And my take on this is no, I don't like that at all. The runner on second base rule is one of the changes that I actually, we've talked about it before, I dislike it the most because I think it's just more the biggest fundamental change to the way the game is played and the way that you score runs. I will add that I stand by what I said before heading into the season. I was completely fine with it this year, no problems at all. I don't think it should remain moving forward, but I'm not gonna, I'm not like so upset about it if it happens that I'm gonna, I don't know what I would do, but I'm not super upset about it. But it's certainly not what I would prefer moving forward, undoubtedly. And an interesting note too, Manfred saying that the DH is a tougher issue, and quote, I think the worst chance is probably the 7-inning game for it continuing carrying over to next year. So the fact that the DH is a tougher issue, that the DH is a tougher issue is an interesting thing, because I think we've all sort of assumed that that's probably going to carry over and that the DH in the National League is just going to remain. But apparently that may not be as likely as we all expect. So that's something to monitor. That's something I don't have an issue with, which I guess maybe you could say that's hypocritical as far as my rationale for the extra innings thing, but I'm okay with the DH staying in the National League moving forward. As far as the 7-inning game, I'm also with Manfred saying it's the worst chance of that continuing. That's fine. It doesn't need to continue. I understand why we did the 7-inning games for the doubleheaders this year to try to reduce, the amount of time at the ballpark, but it shouldn't remain moving forward, assuming we're in a better situation next season. Yesterday marked the final day of the professional baseball agreement between Major League Baseball and minor League Baseball, and no new deal was apparently reached, with Major League Baseball having a plan for the minor leagues which calls for the elimination of up to 40-plus teams. I don't have a lot of other information. There's not a lot of other information known right now, but I would say this is something important to stay tuned to, because the future of the minor leagues here very much up in the air and unclear at this point. Finally, an injury note for you. Rockies outfielder David Dahl underwent shoulder surgery on Tuesday. He's expected to be ready for the start of spring training in 2021. Okay, so now let's dive into, we've gone through the AL side of the bracket and the games thus far on the AL side, and now we're going to head to the NL side of the bracket, where we've only had one game in each series, game twos on the NL side, with the exception of Cubs Marlins, being played today. An update for you: Reds Braves still scoreless, top of the fifth. So the Reds still haven't scored in that series through what would be now 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 innings, if I'm counting that right. The Reds not scoring in the first 13 innings of that series. So yikes there. We'll see what happens top of the fifth in that one. We'll talk about that series actually right now. That's our first series we're going to talk about. And yesterday's first game between the Braves and the Reds, it was a pitcher's duel of historic proportions, something that we basically more expected to see in that Bieber-Cole matchup. For the Braves, lefty Max Fried, who manager Brian Snitker said pregame he was hoping to just get he was hoping to get 5 innings from. Fried did better than that with goodness, I'm struggling with numbers today. Snitker said he hoped to get 5 innings from Fried. Fried was better. He had 7 scoreless innings with 0 walks, 5 strikeouts, and just 78 pitches. For the Reds, Trevor Bauer, one of the front runners, probably the front runner for the NL Cy Young Award, the most likely candidate, he showed pinpoint control in this game, becoming the first pitcher in postseason history with 12 plus strikeouts, no walks, and no runs allowed in a playoff game. Again, first player in postseason history, 12 plus strikeouts, 0 walks, 0 runs in a playoff game. Finished 7 2/3 innings, 103 pitches, his 12 strikeouts setting a new Reds record for a playoff game. And Bauer and Fried became the first opposing starters to both pitch 7 scoreless innings since Madison Bumgarner and Noah Syndergaard at the 2016 NL wildcard game. And even when those two, Bauer and Fried, exited the game, neither team could get a single run across the plate, despite several opportunities. And the game became, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is the game that became the first in MLB postseason history to be scoreless through 11 innings. The 37 strikeouts between the two teams also became the most in postseason history as well. Every player in the starting lineup for the Braves and Reds struck out at least once. And the Reds had a ton of opportunities to bring home a run. Braves did too. Of course, they got it done. The Reds, especially in extras, stranded a bunch of runners. They stranded 13 for the game. And then eventually, in the bottom of the 13th inning, Braves first baseman, NL MVP candidate, my pick for NL MVP, Freddie Freeman, won this game with a walk-off single. First walk-off win against the Reds in the postseason since Carlton Fisk's home run in Game 6 of the 1975 World Series, as the Braves won this one yesterday, 1-0 to take the 1-0 series lead. And, I picked the Braves, I will say, to win this series. That certainly looks like the most likely outcome with the 1-0 series lead in a best-of-3. But this one's certainly not over. Luis Castillo and Ian Anderson pitching today, and as I mentioned just a minute ago, were scoreless in the top of the 5th inning in that game. At this point, checking on the scores, because this is happening live, Castillo, 4 innings pitched, 3 hits allowed, and no walks given, 6 strikeouts, so he looks like he's been great. On the Braves side, Ian Anderson, the rookie for the Braves, he's been outstanding this season. 4 1/3 innings, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. Neither of them has allowed a run yet in that game. So we'll keep you updated on that one heading down the stretch. But Joey Votto of the Reds showing some real confidence after the loss, saying, quote, "I look forward to moving on to the next round." So certainly some confidence from Votto. They're going to have to score some runs eventually today if that's going to happen, though. And next series to talk about, Marlins-Cubs. As I mentioned, we've talked about here on the show multiple times today. Today's Game 2 has been postponed and pushed to tomorrow. But Game 1 was an upset for the Marlins over the Cubs. The Marlins have never lost a postseason series in their history. They're just 1 win away from keeping it that way. Veterans Corey Dickerson and Jesus Aguilar homered off of Kyle Hendricks and Jeremy Jeffress, respectively, in the 7th inning as the Marlins upset the Cubs 5-1 in Game 1 yesterday. And I've talked about the young talent of this Marlins team, particularly on the pitching side. But it's also important to note the veteran additions of the past season, like Aguilar, the first baseman, and DH, like Corey Dickerson, the outfielder, who came up big for the Marlins in that first game. It's a really good combination for the Marlins in terms of that young pitching and young talent, but also they made some, sneaky good offseason additions of some of those veteran hitters who've proved to be really helpful and, from an offensive perspective, obviously in getting the win yesterday, but also I think behind the scenes as well. I mean, you have to believe, and from what I've read, that's playing a role as well. I mean, it's something we don't talk about a lot, the role of, veteran leadership, at least not something I'm not necessarily weighing and putting in here too much on a regular basis. But you have to acknowledge this Marlins team is they're still getting it done. They took Game 1 of this series, and they're now just 1 win away from advancing to the NLDS, which is remarkable. As for the Cubs, Kyle Hendricks was pitching well, 6 scoreless frames before that 7th inning. And Marlins starter Sandy Alcantara was brilliant. 6 2/3 innings of 1 run ball, just a solo home run to Ian Happ. That was the only knock against him. And Miami's bullpen held the Cubs scoreless the rest of the way. I can tell you that the big concern for the Marlins right now, though, is outfielder Starling Marte, who suffered a broken bone in his left hand when he was hit by a pitch in the 9th inning yesterday. He is out of the team's lineup for today, or at least he wasn't. He was out of the lineup before the game was postponed, but apparently he could still play defense or pinch run. So we'll keep an eye on that. So maybe now he's able to play in this series, but that's a loss for the Marlins undoubtedly. As far as my thoughts on this, aside from a couple stretches, the Cubs' offense has really struggled this year. Only 4 hits in Game 1 against the Marlins, and their talented hitters like Javier Baez, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber. We talked about them on the last show, how much they've struggled this year. They're going to have to get things going. Baez telling reporters yesterday after the game, we're still trying to find it. We're still making adjustments and still haven't felt that click as a team. He's talking from an offensive perspective there, but look, they're running out of time. They're 1 loss away from being out of opportunities to get that offense going. So they're going to have, there's certainly the ability for them to erupt. They could just go off in Game 2, which is now going to take place tomorrow, and score 10 runs, and it wouldn't surprise me. But they're running out of opportunities. Marlins capitalizing, and they've got some great young pitching, timely veteran hitting. We'll see if they can pull off the upset here. That would be a big upset, but one that I think, look, if they can do it, it'd be certainly well earned. Next NL Wildcard Series to talk about is Cardinals-Padres. And I guess at first I should say the winner of Braves-Reds will go on to face the winner of Marlins-Cubs. But no idea right now who that's going to be. So, other portion of the NL side of the bracket, we'll start with Cardinals-Padres. Who, the first thing we should note as far as this series is that the Padres, without Dinelson Lamet or Mike Clevenger on their wildcard series roster, General Manager A.J. Preller said he's hopeful that they could be able to pitch in the next round, though Dennis Lin of The Athletic writing yesterday that internally the Padres are more than a little concerned about both pitchers' arms. Lamet, who was just outstanding this year, should certainly be receiving some second or third place, fourth place, fifth place votes for NL Cy Young. He's been outstanding. He's been dealing with biceps discomfort. Clevenger, of course, acquired from the Indians to be this big postseason pitcher, power them to the postseason. He's dealing with an elbow strain. It seems like his situation could be more serious. So the Padres ended up going with Chris Paddock instead of them he got the ball for Game 1 yesterday against the Cardinals. And he showed a lot of potential last year. There's still a lot of potential for him long term, but it wasn't a great season. Still has some incredible stuff, but he didn't have anything yesterday in that start against the Cardinals. He did not look sharp at all. He gave up 8 hits, 6 earned runs in just 2 1/3 innings before getting pulled. Paul Goldschmidt with a 2-run home run, Yadier Molina a single. Those were mixed in there. The Padres, though, they didn't go down without an offensive fight because we know this team, as we talked about on Tuesday's show, there's no easy outs in this lineup. They scored single runs in the first, second, third, and sixth innings, but it was not enough as the Cardinals, they strung together 4 straight hits in the 3rd inning to add 2 runs to their lead and then another run in the 9th inning. The Cardinals winning Game 1 of this series 7-4. Cardinals' top prospect, 21-year-old Dylan Carlson, the outfielder with a huge game in the cleanup spot, 2 for 3, a double, single, 2 walks, and a great defensive play. He became the youngest player in MLB postseason history, with 2 hits, 2 walks, 2 runs, and a stolen base in a game. A bit of an interesting stat there. Today, in that matchup, we'll have Zach Davies on the mound for the Padres. Certainly not the Game 2 starter that in an optimal situation, of course, going up against Adam Wainwright, who, as it turns out, he closed out the Padres in their last postseason appearance back in 2006, as the Cardinals eventually went on to win the World Series that year. And as far as that situation, look, Padres are an outstanding team. There's no easy outs on them offensively, as we've talked about, and the pitching staff is good. But the losses of Dinelson Lamet and Mike Clevenger are significant. There's no other thing to say other than that. They're significant. And even going into this series, knowing that they would be out, I was still, thinking the Padres are going to win. And look, they easily can. You win 2 games now, which can easily happen, and the Padres take that series. But they're in a bit of a tricky situation. They're already in line for a bullpen game in Game 3. So that's going to be an interesting one to see how that plays out. This is a real test for the Padres, as they're now just one loss away from elimination. Final NL wildcard series to discuss. Corey Seager homered and Mookie Betts notched 2 doubles last night as the Dodgers defeated the Brewers 4-2 in Game 1 of that series in the late game last night. One thing to note here for Milwaukee, they, like the Padres, down a couple of great pitchers. Rookie right-hander Devin Williams, who has been the best reliever in baseball this year, was left off of the team's wildcard series roster due to a shoulder issue. He posted a 0.33 ERA, struck out 53 batters in 27 innings this year. He was unbelievably good. Starting pitcher Corbin Burns was also left off the team's wildcard series roster as expected due to an oblique injury. He's been one of the best pitchers in the NL this year. So 2 losses for the Brewers out of the gate in terms of player losses from their roster. And of course, the odds against them, we've talked about this. This is an incredible mismatch in terms of teams statistically speaking and talent-wise, frankly. Bruce Sutter got the call. Brent Sutter, not Bruce Sutter. Brent Sutter got the call for the Brewers in Game 1 last night, and he struggled from the get-go. He lasted just an inning and 2/3, giving up 3 earned runs, no strikeouts, and he walked 5 batters. His 5 walks tied his season total and was tied for the most by a pitcher in an outing of 2 innings or less in postseason history. Now, it looked like early on, and watching this game and also watching the other games that were happening then, it looked early on like this could be an easy lopsided win for the Dodgers. But then the team's bats cooled, and you got to give Milwaukee's pitching credit for doing well pretty much the rest of the way, minus a few mistakes. The Brewers then scored 2 runs in the 4th inning on a 2-run homer by shortstop Orlando Arcia, and all of a sudden it's a close game. But that was really the only strike against Walker Buehler, who struck out 8 in 4 innings for the Dodgers. Julio Urias, Blake Trinan, Kenley Jansen held the Brewers scoreless the rest of the way, and the 4-2 victory for the Dodgers in Game 1. Nothing too crazy about this one. Dodgers offense went a little cold there in the middle, but look, they scored enough runs and the pitching came through against a bad Brewers offense. Kershaw's going Game 2. Clayton Kershaw on the mound today, and Milwaukee with those injuries to key pitchers, including one of their best reliever out of the bullpen. Of course, they have Josh Hader as well, but that's certainly a tricky situation. Nothing too eventful to tell you about. This was probably one of the chaos that we saw the last 2 days in games. This was probably one of the calmer games and more predictable and simpler games that we saw. So that is the NL Wild Card Series update for you. And we're going to give you an update on the scores for you as well of what's going on right now. Reds and Braves still scoreless. In the bottom of the 5th inning, 2 outs, runner on first for the Braves, who lead the series 1-0. And eventually somebody's going to have to score a run in this game. Maybe not go to 13 innings this time. That might be good. The Reds fighting for their playoff lives in this one. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take our final break of the show. And when we come back, we'll do What's on Deck. We've talked about this a little bit, but I'll give you a clear picture of the games that we have on tap for the rest of today, the schedule for tomorrow, assuming that some of those games need to be played, and a couple of thoughts on what we know so far about one of the division series matchups, Rays and Yankees. So What's on Deck is coming up next here on Around the Bases from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back one final time to this Thursday, October 1st edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports, live streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live and twitch.tv/110sports. So it's time for What's on Deck, final segment of the show. We're going to go through what you can expect as far as the schedule the rest of today, tomorrow, and now apparently a Saturday as well, potentially Saturday as well, for Wild Card Series games continuing. First thing to tell you about, we have a run scored in the Reds-Braves game, and it was by the Braves, as Ronald Acuna Jr. just doubled to center field, scoring Austin Riley, and the Braves are out to a 1-0 lead in the bottom of the fifth, and the way that series has been going thus far, that might be all the runs the Braves need. After a 1-0 win in 13 innings yesterday, the Reds now are going to have to score at least 2 runs if they're going to live to fight another day at this point, and they've been held scoreless for several innings now, I believe. And looking at the numbers here a minute ago, the Reds have now been held scoreless yesterday, held scoreless so far today. They've now been held scoreless for their last 9 consecutive postseason innings. So they're going to have to just score some runs, otherwise this one's over. Braves leading 1-0 there. Also coming up on the schedule today, Game 3, winner takes all between the White Sox and A's. As we talked about, it'll be Dane Dunning versus Mike Fiers. That game is at 3:10 Eastern. Then we have Brewers-Dodgers tonight as well. That game, 10 Eastern, I should say, over on ESPN. Clayton Kershaw on the mound for the Dodgers as they look to take Game 2 and the series. Final matchup, we have Cardinals-Padres, 7 Eastern tonight. And that game, Adam Wainwright versus Zach Davies. The Cardinals one win away from advancing. The Padres 1 loss away from being eliminated from the postseason. And then tomorrow, there's a lot of if necessaries on the schedule. The Cardinals and Padres, Braves and Reds, and Brewers and Dodgers will play Game 3 if necessary. The only game we know is going to be taking place tomorrow is Game 2 between the Marlins and the Cubs, with that Game 2 scheduled for today being pushed to tomorrow. So that game is slated for 2 p.m. Eastern, it appears. And then, of course, players are going to there'll be no games this weekend aside from a potential Game 3 on Saturday between the Cubs and Marlins, if it goes that far now. Aside from that, no games on Saturday or Sunday this weekend because that time is for teams to travel to their bubbles. On the AL side and the NL side, of course, the first round games, these wild card series games being played at the higher seeds park. The rest of the way, it's going to be all in the bubbles. The AL bubble in Southern California, the NL bubble in Texas. As far as what we know about what's going to happen there, so far we have one matchup set for the division series. That's going to be Yankees-Rays. Manager Aaron Boone for the Yankees just announcing moments ago, and the most unsurprising news of all time, Garrett Cole will get the ball for Game 1 on Monday. Rays, as we talked about, as I mentioned, they're a really dangerous team. They took 8 of the 10 games against the Yankees that they played this season, and we know that there's been plenty of tension between these two clubs, so who knows what could happen in this series, which begins, as I said, on Monday. On the AL side, we've got the Astros will face the winner of today's Game 3 between the White Sox and A's, and no NLDS teams known yet at this time. Coming up in just a few minutes, as I mentioned, Marlins, Cubs. We already talked about that. Not coming up in a few minutes. That game was postponed to tomorrow. Had that in the notes here and started to say without thinking. But again, the NLDS games will begin on Tuesday in Texas. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Around the Bases from 110 Sports. Thank you for watching today. A couple reminders as we head out on this Thursday. Our live coverage is not over yet for the week. Josh Molinix will be back with the J Mole Show tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then again, same time on Monday, Touchline Talk with Josh Doring. We'll be back with you at 11 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday. And then on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern will be the next episode of Around the Bases, streaming live right here. We'll have a lot to break down by then. We'll have our Division Series matchups set by then, and we will have two game ones played of the ALDS, the two ALDS series. They will have their game ones on Monday, so we'll be talking about that and previewing the NL side of things coming up on Tuesday's show. A lot of baseball still on the schedule for today, and potentially a good chunk of postseason baseball tomorrow as well. As we take one final look at the scoreboard right now, we are in the top of the sixth still. Braves with a 1-0 lead over the Reds there. If they hold that lead or win this game, they're advancing to the NLDS. So once again, thanks for watching Around the Bases from 110 Sports. I'm Chris Brown. I'll talk to you again on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.